Thank you for listening to We Have Ways of Making You Talk. Sign up to our Patreon to receive bonus content, live streams, and our weekly newsletter with money off books and museum visits as well, plus early access to all live show tickets. That's patreon.com/wehaveways.
This is Wendy from Science Versus. This month, our friends at Ford are the presenting sponsor of Science Versus. If you're curious to learn more about things like electric vehicles, Science Versus is a great listen. We dive into topics like how beavers are helping the fight against climate change, what the greenest way to die is, and what a 100% renewable future looks like, and more. Listen to Science Versus on Spotify. Brought to you by Ford.
Well, Mohammed.
In a muted tone.
Welcome to We Have Ways of Making You Talk with me, Al Murray and James Holland. Second World War podcast. Of course, you've listened to our Market Garden series.
Well, we hope you have anyway.
Well, we hope you have. This one will be a bit strange if you haven't, but what we thought we'd do, and by the way, we are at Oosterbeek at the cemetery. This is just before an hour or hour and a half before the service begins.
Already lots of people, aren't there?
Already lots of people.
Bathed in sunlight.
Many maroon lids and so on. But what we thought we'd do in this episode is ask some big what ifs.
Big what ifs, and I think some sort of conclusions to it all, because I think that the start point is that this has been condemned.
Dismissed, this
operation as a waste of time, hubris on the part of Montgomery.
Monty's ego running wild, doing something completely out of character, which is sort of, high risk. What on earth is going on? What were they thinking? Yeah.
So I think we should start off with that premise. So let's go back to where we were. Paris falls on the 25th of August.
Yep.
Then Brussels, right at the beginning of September. They're sweeping across northwest Europe.
Yep.
Americans sweeping to the east. British and Canadians heading northwards into the kind of Low Countries. And
there's been an assassination attempt on Hitler.
You
can't forget that.
No,
because if you're weighing up the state of the German government from the other side of the English Channel, you're thinking, well, they're falling apart.
Yeah.
Bagratine is this is the other thing. I know we're often like Western-centric on the podcast, but if you add Operation Bagratine to this picture, if you're the Germans, This beats 1918 by a very, very long way in terms of collapse and reverses for the Germans.
And we also looked at that SHAEF, which is, let's not forget it, is the Supreme Allied Headquarters. So this is Eisenhower and all the top lot. And that intelligence report that comes out is issued on the 16th of September, Saturday the 16th of September, and it says, the Germans are simply incapable of any meaningful reaction at the moment. They can't mount an offensive because they just don't have enough. The number of tanks, it's literally impossible for them to do this.
Yeah.
So you've got that swirling around, these great victories, and yes, they know about 2 SS Panzer Corps, but part of 2 SS Panzer Corps is on a train going towards Berlin, or is being loaded up to go on a train towards Berlin. They are in complete disarray. I'd say one of the things where they've maybe taken their eye off the ball is, if you look at, for example, at the campaign in Italy, you can see how often German forces manage to rally from ridiculous situations which they have no right
scrape themselves together, organise themselves. And also, again, the thing we've looked at with Italy is how defending it's straightforward, at least.
Yes.
You know what you've got to do. Yes. You don't have to take the initiative. You don't have to do any particularly great tactical thinking or even display dash and verve. What you've got to do is sight some machine guns well and hold on. And if you're politically motivated, like lots of Germans are, you're going to do that.
Okay, so perhaps the Allies have kind of sort of underestimated the Germans' ability to rally. However, let's not take away from the fact that there's been this colossal victory. The German armies in Normandy have been absolutely trounced. 50,000 men escape. Maybe 24 tanks out of 2,500 which have been left in Normandy. It is a catastrophic loss for the Germans, and all that follows in the kind of 2 weeks after that sort of confirms that.
Absolutely.
And you reinforce success. And let's not forget also that you've got this Allied Airborne Army of 3 divisions, a whole corps, and planes. It's not the 2 that were mustered by the RAF yesterday. There's quite a lot more.
Let's not get sidebarred by that, James.
I know, but I'm still fuming about it.
I know, of course you are.
But anyway, so you've got that of these highly motivated troops, and there is no question that the Siegfried Line, the West Wall, as it's also known, Germany's border defences, which have been substantially reinforced in the previous 6 months.
And also talked up a great deal.
And
I think if you're thinking, well, if there's a way of getting around, this, you're going to investigate it properly, I think. I mean, I think one of the things that's interesting about this is, and we touched on it in a minute, Montgomery's hubris, his ego, right? The Allied way of war doesn't allow one person to say, I'm going to do this and hair off on a hairbreadth. It's a coalition, it's collegiate, it's about people working together. And after all, this has to be signed off by Ike. So if it's Monty's ego, Ike agrees with it. I mean, I just don't
buy that at all.
I don't buy it at all. And after all, if what you're trying to do is speed up the end of the war, what's wrong with that?
Well, okay, so this leads me to the next point, and this is, I suppose, has been kind of, I've been thinking about this a lot harder, having seen how the population of Arnhem, and to a certain degree the population of Nijmegen and Holland as a whole commemorates this battle, and particularly this one here in Arnhem. It's incredible.
Yeah.
And I think that's because this was a highly laudable aim.
Yeah.
The point of trying to liberate this part of Holland, try and get in through the back door of Germany, what's wrong with that idea?
Yeah, well, it's not a Hergen Forest meat grinder, right?
Well, so this is the other problem, is every bit of the German border is tricky. It comes with all sorts of problems.
Yeah.
The northwest coast of Holland is full of, land that's below water level. So that's no good.
Yeah.
Then you've got the Herken Forest, which that's no good. It's much bigger than the Reichswald.
Yeah.
You've got gargantuan numbers of rivers, and the rivers coming down the German border sort of north to south are much wider than they are in northern Holland, even though there's a lot of rivers to come across. There's 9 bridges to capture, etc. But, it's much more complicated. Geographically, here the land is undulating, it's not flat. So that helps you.
Yeah.
It's great tank country, this. Well, it is, though, isn't it?
No, it is. It's a really good tank country, yeah.
And, geographically, this is about the best bit of getting into Germany, and it hasn't got the border defences.
Yeah. And it offers you, if this works, it offers you an encirclement of the whole of the Netherlands.
Yes.
It's the other thing, which after all, I think too little is made of the V-weapon threat.
Well, we've talked about the first V1s landing on the 13th of June 1944,
and
that's a game changer.
And the first V2 is September the 2nd.
Yeah.
It's Staveley Road in Chiswick, and at the time, the Cabinet, they think the V2 is going to be a 10-ton warhead, not a 1-ton warhead. They know something about it, but they don't know everything about it.
Yeah.
And they're really, really worried. And obviously, they immediately go into lying that it's a gas main blowing up because they think this thing is going to make the war more difficult with the civilian population. And after all, June, July, August is the biggest casualty period for Great Britain in the Second World War because
of Normandy, because of Italy, because of...
Exactly. Normandy, Italy, Burma to an extent, and the Second Blitz. And I think you can't say that the British government wanting to bring that to an end is somehow foolhardy or rash, because, war is all about, if war is politics by other means, you've got a political problem if your home turf is being attacked and you're vulnerable to air attack, which after all, when we talked about the bomber offences, the Germans are immediately caught. When we did our Masters of the Air series, the Germans have to defend the Reich.
Yeah.
The British government has to defend
Great Britain,
right? And also, I mean, even, you consider Churchill's historic strategic sense, right? The coast of the lowlands has always been the thing that we know, the British governments have always known in their guts they have to make sure they have control of. It's why we've entered, Britain has entered countless wars, or England, then Great Britain, entered countless wars in Europe. It's for that aim. And this is a situation where that coast is not under our control. So you win here, you can deal with that. You encircle, I mean, people say, oh, well, what about the Scheldt? Well, if this works, the people in the Scheldt are in an enormous pocket, aren't they?
Yeah.
And may need to throw in the towel. Yes. And you're offered another encirclement. And of course, the Falaise battle, the whole Normandy battle, is about creating an encirclement, wrapping the Germans up. So you can see what's on offer here. And if you multiply that properly...
Yeah. Also, let's just go back to kind of, Monty's hubris and Monty's ambition, which is this bogey that just constantly follows him. And, there's no question about it. The way he spoke and the way he wrote after the war
is unhelpful.
There's also no question that when it comes to kind of, one-to-one charm, it's lacking. It doesn't mean to say he's without charm, because he can be very funny and he's very humorous and he can be, all those things.
Well, the people who like him really like him.
Really like him.
Yeah.
But he's cussed and difficult and can be, extremely rude and all those sort of things.
Yeah.
But there's nothing wrong with personal ambition. He might have personal ambition to want to go into Germany and lead the British forces and Allied forces into northern Germany. But I don't have a problem with that if the decision-making is the right one.
Yeah.
The problem is when ambition clouds your judgment. But I don't think there's any case here of his judgment being clouded by personal ambition.
No.
I think this offers a potential break into Germany that could solve the V2 problem, could win the war by Christmas, which then removes the strain on manpower, which is currently eating away at Britain, ensures that Britain has a seat at the top table, as America is putting more and more resources into the Western war effort.
If you can get it over in Europe more quickly, you can deal with Japan
more quickly. Well, that's the other thing I was just about to come on to. And I think, we also are in danger of separating the European war from the war in the Far East, the war in the Pacific. And the two, you've got to see them by this stage of the war as one big global conflict.
Yep.
And, whether it's sorting things out in Italy and sorting things out in Normandy, or whether it's sorting things out in Europe or sorting things out in the Far East and the Pacific, they're two major military problems and political problems that you've got to resolve, and you've got to do them the best possible way you can. So I think the idea, the concept, at a time where the Allies are on the charge, the Germans seem beaten, they seem to be in chaos, the geography of the landscape is favourable, about as favourable as it's going to be anywhere along Germany's border.
And you've got this airborne army.
And you've got the airborne army. Or put that all together, why wouldn't you do it?
Well, and one thing the airborne army's vulnerable to is flak. There's far more flak once you get into the Reich than there is here.
Yes.
And in a way, it's a confluence of these things, right? Because after all, when it comes to Wesel, they land on the flak guns. It's the way of overpowering them. But there's far less flak here, relatively speaking. So you can do it. The other thing is this, as well as the geography, as well as the opportunity it offers, you can do this here, and you might not be able to do it 4 months later down the line into Germany. It's just going to be that much more difficult. So there's a sort of planetary alignment that makes this a possibility. So, I mean, I think we've successfully done there is put ourselves in the shoes of the people making these decisions in 1944.
Yeah.
We've tried to take out some of the sort of calcified hindsight that's built up around, because after all, they don't know this isn't going to work.
Yeah.
And I don't know that when they're making the decision, that's their calculus of risk either. They think these things are worth risking. There's a band beginning to strike up behind us.
I think
anyway,
so.
After the break,
we'll come back and we'll sort of look at it in a bit more detail, but also kind of see whether it could have worked.
Yeah. And what then that offers.
Yeah.
Welcome back to We Have Ways to Make You Talk with me, Al Murray and James Holland, and we are recording this final. Will it be the last Market Garden stuff we ever do? I don't think so. Final episode of this Market Garden series, and we're in the CWGC cemetery in Oosterbeek just before the commemoration begins. So that's the chat in the background. Every now and again, a brass band might check its tubas working or whatever. And we were talking about trying to put ourselves in the thinking space that the people who initiated Market Garden were in.
Yeah, I don't think the concept seems, when you go back to all the conditions and all those things that we've just been discussing, I don't think that the concept of it seems quite as outrageous as history has suggested it was.
Yeah.
And I don't think it seems quite as... the whole point, everyone says, but Monty never took any risks, he always waited to build up.
Oh, no, and then when he does take a risk, they'll go, well, what's Monty doing taking risks?
Yeah,
he can't get off the hook on that one. But what it suffers from here is the Allies are 6 months ahead of their reach exceeds their grasp by 6 months. If you had the planes, if you could do this in one lift here, if you had the aircraft, if the transport commands were big enough, if they would have done that.
Yeah.
But, you can't do this in 6 months' time. You've got to go now.
You've got to go now. And there's no question that the planning is incredibly rushed, even though large parts of it are from earlier plans.
Yeah.
Certainly part of the logistic plans go all the way back to kind of June.
That's right. They sort of build it out of off-the-peg items.
Yeah, that's exactly how it was. But let's go from bit by bit, because, let's start with 30 Corps.
Yeah.
They don't get going till 2:30 in the afternoon. I mean, you've looked at the Horrocks book, And you pointed out that he said he wanted to wait for the airlift to be coming over and to be able to see it before he went, because so many are being cancelled. But I just don't buy that at all. Because, okay, so what happens if they do start at 5 in the morning and the airlift gets cancelled at the last minute? They've moved 5 miles into Holland.
Yeah.
So?
Yeah.
What's not to like? Why is that a problem? You can stop.
You can always stop. It's sort of essentially mysterious, that. And this is the thing, actually, is there's some decisions and some moments which, in the end, I think we've done what we can to get into the sort of macro, why you do this now, what are the advantages, what it offers. But once you get into those things, I think they become more mysterious. And certainly some of the decisions about what to do here in Arnhem that 1st Airborne Division have made are kind of mysterious. And I think speak of personal tensions and all those sort of things that are very, very hard to examine properly. Urquhart's thing here is within 1st Airborne is that he's from out of town.
Yeah.
He's a landlubber. He's been foisted on them, as some of them see it. Yeah. Some of the brigadiers think they should have got the job, possibly. Yeah. There's all that going on. And that clearly is a big pressure on him, and he defers to them. So it's not his plan as such to get the thing to get to the bridge. And he's also stymied by having to do 2 lifts. And it's, I think, more than anything else, it's the 2 lifts that does for the whole thing, because he's got one hand tied behind his back because he's got to protect these landing and drop zones, and Gavin has one hand tied behind his back because he has to protect his landing and drop zones. Anyway, we've done that, I think, over and over. And,
okay, but let's just go. I haven't quite finished on Horrocks yet. So the point of Horrocks is Horrocks is he's obviously a really good bloke. All the men like him. All the chaps like him. He's the right sort of chap.
Right sort of chap theory. We're developing this new. You can keep your longue durée and you can keep.
RSOCT.
RSOCT. Yeah, right sort of chap
theory.
Yeah.
But okay. So I'm sticking with my
RSOCT.
My ROTC. Whatever it is. RSOCT.
RSOCT.
Yeah, that's very good. But it's not the first time he's been slow to start.
Yeah.
And huge, great armoured forces are cumbersome beasts by their very nature. But, Wadi Akarit, for example, there's that massive hole that 4th Indian Division have kind of knocked out of the Italian line. And he doesn't exploit it. He's too slow to get moving. Yeah. So he's got form there. And, the reason why they've charged so fully up to that point is because the opposition's been incredibly slight. Germans really are truly in disarray. They haven't regained their balance. This is exactly the same thing that happens immediately after Rome, that the Allied armies surge forward because they're just in complete disarray. Yeah. And there is clearly a golden opportunity to really drive them forward. And I don't think Horrocks drives that quick enough. I don't think his core planners are forceful enough in this. I think there's a dash of complacency that's come in. Because otherwise you would have started at 5 in the morning.
But also, what is the state of 30 Corps by mid-September 1944?
Yeah, but if you can get going at 2:30, you can get going at 5.
Yes, but
they're in very good state because the Guards Armoured have had to do bugger all basically until this point. They haven't done very much. And even 11 Armoured Division hasn't done that much.
West 6th Division have been very busy.
They've done a hell of a lot, they absolutely have. An 8th Independent Armour Brigade have certainly done a huge amount.
11th Armoured have been busy.
They've been busy, okay. But Guards Armoured Division has not done a huge amount because they are an Armoured Division. And Armoured Divisions are supposed to exploit, not grind.
Well, and here they are being asked to exploit.
Yeah, so get on with it. That's my point. I just don't think there is enough urgency in anyone's thinking at the top of Guards Armoured or 30 Corps. And that's not a criticism of the individual commanders. It's just an overall kind of, because if there was, they would leave at 5 in the morning or 3 in the morning or 6 in the morning on the day that this is supposed to kick off. There's no reason not to go earlier.
Yeah.
Or if there is, I don't know what it is. And I can't imagine that it's so powerful that it usurps the benefits of getting going earlier.
But then last night we were in the square in Arnhem. There were many people in maroon to talk to. And I got chatting with one or two of the officers and said, you know what went wrong here, don't you? And they're like, yeah, there's dither. There's dither. And,
that's interesting.
And sort of prevarication and stopping and all that sort of thing. And that, since the lesson of Arnhem for the parachute regiment is don't dither.
Well, I think that's absolutely true. But I also think there's a lack of absolute clarity.
Yeah.
You lot have been, you've got to do this, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. But what is the ultimate mission? The ultimate mission is to enable 30 Corps to get to Arnhem as quickly as possible. Yeah. And that trumps absolutely everything. And I'm not sure that is allowed to trump absolutely everything all the time, because if it is, 30 Corps would get going earlier. They'd give themselves, if they left at 5 in the morning, that's 5, 7, 9 and a half hours.
More daylight and all that, yeah.
And all that.
Yeah. Well, yes, of course.
Okay, so that's 30 Corps. 101st at Eindhoven, I don't really think you can criticise anything they do. They do it all pretty well.
And the US 82nd getting a muddle.
Okay, so my beef with 82nd Airborne is twofold. The first one is, if you're going to have a second lift, why make it drop zone T?
Well, but that's
why not drop zone O?
But that's the question. We were up at the Ginkleheath. Why a fresh one that's even further away?
Yeah.
It seems like whatever the air planners have got to talk themselves out of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Sebastian Ritchie's done a very good job in sort of persuading everyone that it wasn't the RAF's fault in any way whatsoever, and it's very convincing, and I think he's largely right.
Yeah.
But whoever's choosing those lift sites has got it wrong.
It's a mutual process between the Army and the Air Force.
Clearly those are the wrong. The Ginkleheath is the wrong decision.
Yeah.
Drop zone T, which is on the eastern side of the Groesbeek Heights, looking towards the Reichswald, right under the noses of the German border. That is a insane place to have your second lift.
Yeah.
Particularly because you've got a built-in defence around drop zone O, which is to the west and to the south.
More your centre of gravity. Yeah.
Well, because you've got 508th going sort of north to the northeast. Yeah. You've got the 505th to the kind of centre in the east, and you've got the 504th. The Grave Bridge and Newman Bridge to the southwest and west. So it's naturally protected without you having to do any extra protection. That's the point.
Yeah. Well,
you can still hold the Groesbeek Heights.
As would Renkum here, you don't have to send KOSB out to the Ginkleheath.
Yeah, but the point is you can 508th can hold the Groesbeek Heights with a comparatively skeleton force because you can see everything that's coming.
Yeah.
Because you've got that stretch of 4 miles to the Reichswald.
Yeah.
From the Groesbeek Heights, you can see it. So in that time, you've got the time to deploy whatever troops you need to kind of counterattack that. But what you can then do is do what Gavin suggests to Lindqvist, the commander of the 508th, which is to drop down from the Groesbeek Heights to the north, where you've got this 1.5 miles between the Groesbeek Heights and the River Vaal, and attack the bridge from the east.
Yep.
Because there is nothing on the eastern side of the bridge, as we discovered the other day. There's
nothing to get
there wasn't then, and there isn't now.
Yeah. Okay, so, but that comes back to your thing. The core aim is to get 30 Corps to Arnhem.
And to get that bridge as quickly as possible.
US 82nd Airborne aren't thinking in those terms, are they?
They're just not, no. What Gavin is worried about and why he thinks that the Grave Bridge is the most important of all is that he doesn't want to have 82nd Airborne.
He doesn't want to get cut off.
Because he says beforehand, I think this is going to be a bad business, it's going to do a lot of harm. If I get out of this, I'll be lucky.
Yeah.
So I think his first thought is, I can't lose my division, which I've just taken command of.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, he's only human, Jim. Even Jim Gavin. Well, even Jumping Jim, he's only human. I mean, one of the big sort of calumnies about what happens here is it the wrong crystals and all that, radio communication?
It isn't.
It isn't. And the problem with that argument is no one's expecting the radios to work. Nobody. 11 Power got new walkie-talkies. When they don't work, they're going, of course they don't work. They never did. Jack Reynolds says to his signaller, get rid of the radio. It doesn't work. It's priced in. And because being landed by air is so unstable, and also you're out there on your own, there isn't a replacement radio coming up from your B echelon.
Yeah.
Because there's no B echelon.
Yeah. So there's no replacement scout car with radio equipment like there is for the 4th Dorsets in Normandy.
It's not the radios.
Yeah.
And of course, one of the issues here is you're really dispersed. They're fighting. If you've got people at Arnhem Bridge and then people at the Ginkleheath, as you do, 9 miles apart, the sets can't do it. So you have to set up a net that's a chain, and that's difficult. And it's not the sandy soil, it's not the landscape, which is another one of the things, it's the sandy soil here didn't help with the radios, or the undulating land. Well, what? And that falls into we've come to Holland so it'll be flat, so the radios ought to work sort of mindset, which is just, there are a lot of people looking for excuses about what goes wrong here. And really, the location is some of the brigade level thinking, I think, and divisional orders here don't add up. So it's not the wrong crystals. You could put that one to bed. What I want to talk about those, let's say it works. What happens next? Because SHAEF are going to have to go, right, okay.
But do you accept that at Arnhem it could have worked?
Oh, yeah. It could have worked at Arnhem if they got it right in Nijmegen. The thing that causes the failure here is not, in the end, the sort of the dither, not the dispersal of effort. It's the fact that Nijmegen Bridge isn't taken on D-Day or D+1.
Well, you made a really interesting point the other day. You know, the impressiveness of the river crossing of the Waal has hidden the fact that they're doing it in the first place.
Yeah, but that's always the case, you know, with when things go wrong and there's this extraordinary gallant action, you can point to that and go, isn't that amazing?
Yeah, here's some Medal of Honours.
And, you know, you can't argue. The men of US 82nd Airborne, they're incredible soldiers because they could do a river crossing 4 days into an operation, you know, and all that, and it obscures the fact that they're having to do it in the first place.
Yeah.
But if it had worked, what are we looking at? Schaefer going to have to go, yes, Monty, okay, you've made the breakthrough. We're now leaning to our left flank. They're going to have to reinforce it. They're going to have to take it seriously. Do you then push on the left and right flanks of the salient as well, or do you send people up? Does it try to turn itself into an encirclement? What do you actually do, and what happens? And you know, there's this Gatwick conception that Monty's headquarters are kicking around the week of the week of Market Garden is what we're going to do next. And basically it's the same as Veritable, but without on a minute. So they're knocking those ideas around that you
go straight for the Reichswald already.
Yeah, but with the add-on of being able to flank it.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, it would have changed the dynamic in Schaef's planning because it busts the broad front. So the Americans would have to do a lot of sort of swallowing of that.
Yeah.
You know.
But suddenly you're getting into more kind of deep battle, aren't you? Because suddenly it's on a narrower front. It's still a freaking enormous front, but it's still narrow. I mean, it's still wider than the width of Italy, for example.
Yeah.
But you know, you are then going to be sort of funneling things one division after another, rather than just spreading them all out on a long thing. But maybe that's not a bad thing, you know. Particularly if you've then got Dragoon going on. Don't forget. So you've still got them attacking the south, which is going to route German troops to the south.
Bind them to the south. Yeah.
So so the idea that it would then run out of steam once you get to even if you got on them, I think is also nonsense.
Yeah,
I mean, it could be done. I mean, you know, the Allied resources, and also if you clear up the Scheldt pretty quickly by overrunning the German resistance in the Netherlands.
Well, if you've taken Deelen airfield, you've got an airfield to bring stuff and people in. I mean, the thing is obviously this is,
doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Obviously, this is all. This is the sort of purest blue sky conjecture, but it would have changed how Eisenhower. He'd have had to change how he approached the war. He'd have had to say, "All right, I have to prioritise one of my flanks now," and it would have been the
northern flank,
the British end of things.
Yep. And the Americans still could have taken huge credit for it because of the involvement of 101st and 82nd.
But then you may have also seen, you know, as happens later in the war, American corps coming over to Monty's command in all, you know, which happens for the crossing of the Rhine
as you know, British corps are being attached to Clark's Fifth Army in Italy.
Exactly, because it's not
they're coalitions, and it's and you know the differences in uniform and equipment are not so stark that you can't do that.
Yeah. So there we have it. It could have worked. It could have worked.
Should have worked.
Should have worked. Didn't work.
Didn't work. but generally good idea.
Yeah.
90% successful.
Yeah. 90% successful. We're going Lindqvist and Lathbury. Is that who we're holding responsible?
Well, Lindqvist, I think definitely. I think he's I think the second lift thing, I think your point is really, really good. Did they need it? No, as it turns out. But they're basing the second lift on previous
Sicily. Everything that happens here is
okay. So if you're going to have a second lift, don't make it a debilitating second lift. Make it meaningful and actually going to help your project.
Yeah.
So you do that by using drop zone O at Nijmegen, not drop zone T.
Yeah.
And you use the existing drop zones here.
DZX here.
Yeah.
Well, and when it comes to Assault the following year, they do one lift because they know they can only do one lift.
And it works brilliantly.
It works very well, but again,
a lot of losses.
A lot of losses, because that's the other thing.
Flak.
Is you flak because you're in Germany, and you've got to be prepared to lose paratroopers. You know, unfortunately.
On that note, the pipes and drums have started up.
Yeah.
I think that's probably our cue to draw.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
And we need to kind of pay our respects now.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. Thanks for listening. We'll see you soon. Cheerio.
Cheerio.
Arnhem, Black Tuesday, 24 hours in the Battle of Arnhem. From me, Al Murray. Now, if you're familiar with me, and we have ways of making you talk, you know I do everything I can to crowbar the Battle of Arnhem into every conversation. Well, here it is, the full crowbar. Arnhem Black Tuesday, out now in hardback, ebook and audio.
5 bitter months of fighting, 4 bloody battles, 1 legendary campaign. Casino 44 by me, James Holland, is the astonishing story of one of the most brutal and hard-fought battles of the Second World War in Italy, told in the moment and from the perspective of those who lived, fought and died there. Casino 44, out now in hardback, ebook and audio.